Crystal Gayle, the radiant voice of American country music. The woman whose floor-length hair became as legendary as her voice. From a coal miner's daughter born in a one-room cabin where black dust clung to every surface, she rose to become the first female country artist ever to earn platinum certification, breaking barriers her famous sister could never reach. With her silken voice and sophisticated crossover sound, she conquered not just Nashville, but the world. 18 #1 hits, more than Loretta Lynn herself. 3 American Music Awards, 2 CMA Female Vocalist of the Year trophies, and a Grammy that proved she had stepped out of every shadow cast upon her. For over 5 decades, Crystal Gayle has stood as living proof that grace, discipline, and quiet determination can rewrite destiny. But behind that shimmering cascade of hair and those brown eyes blue lies a story not glamorous, but devastating. A battlefield of childhood trauma, suffocating comparisons, an industry that abandoned her when she needed them most, and a trail of family deaths that began when her father collapsed from black lung disease and never stopped claiming the people she loved. The world has admired her elegance for decades, but few are prepared to face the haunting truth she carries. The silent losses that no platinum record could heal, the reinvention that saved her career but cost her identity, and the grief that even fame's brightest lights could never erase. Now at 74, as she continues to walk onto stages across America, Crystal Gayle stands as the last survivor of a family that gave country music 2 of its greatest voices. And the price she paid for that survival is beyond heartbreaking. Before we begin, if Crystal Gayle's voice ever moved you, if her story ever gave you hope, leave a like as a tribute to a woman who turned poverty into platinum, silence into strength, and loss into a legacy that refuses to fade. Behind the elegance and the floor-length hair lies a cruel truth. Crystal Gayle's first stage was not lit with spotlights, but with the dim glow of kerosene lamps in a one-room cabin, where hope died as fast as the coal dust settled. Born on January 9, 1951 in Paintsville, Kentucky, Brenda Gayle Webb entered a world that had already broken her father's lungs and her mother's spirit. She was the youngest of 8 children, the only one born in a hospital instead of the family's Butcher Hollow cabin, a detail that seemed like progress but changed nothing about the merciless poverty waiting at home. Her father, Melvin Theodore Webb, descended into the Van Leer mines each morning before dawn, his body disappearing into Consolidation Coal Company tunnels where the air tasted like metal and death. The company owned everything: the house, the utilities, the food from the company store. Paychecks arrived already hollowed out by debt. Most miners never escaped. They just worked until the black lung took them. Her mother, Clara Marie, held the family together with hands so calloused they felt like leather, enduring miscarriages in cornfields and then returning to work as if pain were just another crop to harvest. Years later, Crystal would recall her mother's words with quiet devastation. I remember her telling me of being out hoeing the corn and having a miscarriage, and then going right back out and hoeing the corn. They were powerful back then. The Webb children were known locally as the Creek Gang. 8 souls packed into a space where privacy didn't exist and hunger was a permanent guest. Melvin Jr., Loretta, Herman, Jay Lee, Donald, Peggy Sue, Betty Ruth, and finally Crystal, 19 years younger than Loretta. The age gap meant they were strangers sharing blood. By the time Crystal was born, Loretta was already married at 15 and gone, chasing her own desperate escape from the mountains that swallowed futures whole. Inside that cabin, there was little difference between the depression and prosperity. Both felt the same. Cold in winter, suffocating in summer, and always the weight of not enough. Not enough food, not enough warmth, not enough hope. The smell of coal smoke mixed with damp wood and the faint metallic scent of poverty that clings to skin, no matter how hard you scrub. Dinners were cornbread and beans, stretched as far as they could go. Some nights, just cornbread. Crystal learned early to be grateful for what little arrived and to never ask for more. When she was 4, the family fled Kentucky for Wabash, Indiana. not for opportunity but for survival. Her father's lungs were failing. Black lung disease, coal workers' pneumoconiosis, the slow suffocation every miner knew was coming. The mines were closing anyway. In Indiana, Melvin found work at a factory mill. Life became, in Crystal's careful words, somewhat more comfortable. Not good, just less brutal. The cabin was replaced by a small house. The constant hunger eased slightly, but the shadow of the mines followed them north, embedded in her father's ravaged chest. Then came February 22nd, 1959. Crystal was 8 years old, standing in their Indiana home when her father suffered a massive stroke, a complication of lungs turned to stone by years of coal dust. Melvin Theodore Webb died that day, and something inside his youngest daughter died with him. The man who had been quiet, shy, gentle, vanished without warning, and the little girl who had inherited his temperament retreated into a shell she would never fully leave. Years later, Crystal would describe what happened next with a clarity that still trembles with pain. When my dad died, I developed a nervous habit. He was very shy and quiet, and I was like him. Where Loretta is more flamboyant, I went into a shell. She began wringing her hands compulsively, the same gesture Loretta had dreamed about before their father's death. In Loretta's book, Crystal recalled, she says she dreamed of him dying and she would be wringing her hands. Well, that was me. In real life, when she came back for the funeral, that was me standing there doing the wringing of the hands. Her mother took her to a doctor, worried the child was breaking. A stern German doctor told me to quit, Crystal remembered. I think I needed that father figure to tell me to quit. The hand-wringing stopped, but the introversion, the fear, the sense that the world could steal anyone at any moment, that stayed, embedded like coal dust in lungs. Permanent. That loss became the foundation of everything. The silence she carried on stage, the grace that seemed effortless but was really armor, the voice that could break hearts because it had already been shattered. Crystal Gayle did not begin with music. She began with grief. And from that grief, she learned the cruelest lesson childhood can teach. That love is fragile, that fathers disappear, and that some wounds never close. They just become part of who you are. Humiliated yet unbroken, Crystal Gayle stood at a merciless crossroad. At 16, she was Brenda Gayle Webb, the forgotten youngest sister of a country music superstar, living in her family's modest Indiana home, carrying a voice she wasn't sure belonged anywhere. Her sister Loretta had exploded into stardom with coal miner's daughter, turning their shared poverty into legend. But Crystal had no such story. She was just the shy girl with the dead father, the one who wrung her hands until a German doctor told her to stop. In 1967, Loretta gave her the first break. When illness forced Loretta to cancel a Grand Ole Opry performance, she called Crystal. "You're going on for me." Crystal was terrified. She arrived in Nashville wearing a homemade dress, her heart pounding so hard she thought the microphone might pick it up. She sang Gordon Lightfoot's Ribbon of Darkness to a crowd that had come to see Loretta Lynn. When the applause came, it felt hollow. They weren't clapping for her. They were clapping for Loretta's stand-in. By 1970, Loretta had secured Crystal a recording contract with Decca Records, the same label that had launched her own career. It should have been a dream come true. Instead, it became a cage. Decca wanted another Loretta Lynn. They pushed her toward traditional honky-tonk country, songs drenched in twang and heartache. Her debut single, I've Cried the Blue Right Out of My Eyes, written by Loretta herself, peaked at number 23. 4 years of trying and only 2 singles cracked the top 40. Every review compared her to Loretta. Every radio interview asked what it was like to be Loretta's little sister. Every door that opened did so because of a name that wasn't hers. It didn't take me long to realize. Crystal would later admit with quiet devastation, I was only there because I was Loretta's sister. The rejection didn't come with shouting or cruelty. It came with polite dismissals, with songs that climbed halfway up the charts and then fell, with the suffocating awareness that she would never be enough because she could never be Loretta. She was a copy, and copies are never as valuable as the original. Even her name wasn't her own. Decca already had Brenda Lee under contract. Driving through Nashville one afternoon, Loretta spotted a Crystal hamburger restaurant and declared, "That's your name. Crystals are bright and shiny, like you." Brenda Gayle Webb died that day. Crystal Gayle was born, named after a fast food chain, her identity rewritten by the sister whose shadow she could not escape. But it was Loretta who also gave her the key to freedom. One day, after another failed single, Loretta sat her down and spoke with brutal honesty. "Quit singing my songs and do not record anything that I would. You go middle of the road because we already have one Loretta, and we don't need another. If you don't, you'll only ever be compared to me." Those words cut deep because they were true. Crystal had been trying to become someone she wasn't, and in that trying, she had lost herself. In 1974, she left Decca and signed with United Artists, partnering with producer Alan Reynolds. The decision felt like stepping off a cliff. Reynolds didn't want another Loretta Lynn. He wanted something different. Sophisticated, smooth, layered with pop sensibilities that traditional country radio would call sacrilege. They crafted a sound that blended country storytelling with lush orchestration, a style that felt as much like soft rock as honky-tonk. Wrong Road Again hit number 6 country in 1974. Then came I'll Get Over You and You Never Miss a Real Good Thing, both climbing to number 1 in 1976. Suddenly, Crystal wasn't Loretta's little sister anymore. She was Crystal Gayle, and the world was finally listening. Then came the song that changed everything. In June 1977, Richard Lee brought Alan Reynolds a ballad called "Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue." Crystal recorded it in a single take. Magic in the studio that day, she would later say, her voice soft with the memory. The song was haunting, vulnerable, achingly beautiful. It spent 4 weeks at number 1 country, climbed to number 2 pop, blocked only by Debbie Boone's You Light Up My Life, and became an international phenomenon, reaching number 5 in the UK. The album's We Must Believe in Magic went platinum, making Crystal the first female country artist in history to achieve that milestone. Not Loretta, not Tammy, not Dolly. Crystal. The shy girl from Butcher Hollow had done something even her legendary sister never could. And in that triumph, she finally escaped the shadow. By 1978, Crystal Gayle was unstoppable. Talking in Your Sleep hit number 1 country and number 18 pop. Ready for the Times to Get Better followed. Album after album went gold and platinum. She toured China with Bob Hope in 1979, the first country artist to perform on the Great Wall. Awards flooded in, 2 consecutive CMA Female Vocalist of the Year trophies in 1977 and 1978. 3 American Music Awards, a Grammy, her face on magazine covers, her voice on every radio station. She accumulated 18 Billboard number 1 country singles, more than Loretta's 16, ranking 4th among all women in country music history. The girl once dismissed as Little Loretta had not just stepped out of the shadow. She had built her own light. But success in country music is a cruel mistress. It gives with one hand and takes with the other. And Crystal Gayle, at the height of her power, was about to learn that even queens can be dethroned. Fame had found Crystal Gayle, but it also tested her in ways no award could prepare her for. By the early 1980s, the sophisticated crossover sound that had made her a star was beginning to feel like a trap. Country radio was shifting. Traditional artists like Randy Travis and the Judds dominated the airwaves. The middle-of-the-road approach that had freed her from Loretta's shadow now made her sound dated, polished, too slick for the new wave of authenticity sweeping through Nashville. Then came the fracture that would change everything. In 1982, Elektra Records chief Jimmy Bowen demanded changes to her True Love album. Alan Reynolds, the producer who had built her sound, refused. Bowen took over 3 tracks himself. The result was a creative divorce. Reynolds, the man who had helped her escape Loretta's shadow, was gone. And with him went the sonic architecture of her career. The pressure mounted from every side. Label executives whispered that her look was tired, that she needed to modernize. Then came the suggestion that cut deeper than any failed single. Cut your hair. Create buzz. Relaunch your career. The floor-length hair that had become her signature, the visual identity inseparable from her name, was suddenly a liability. It was old-fashioned, they said, outdated, a gimmick. But her children intervened. "You can't cut your hair," they told her. "You won't be Crystal Gayle anymore." She listened, she kept the hair, and the label support evaporated. The chart decline tells the story with brutal clarity. Another World peaked at number 4 in 1987, her last top 10 hit. Nobody's Angel reached number 14 in 1988. A Long and Lasting Love stalled at 23 in 1989. By 1990, Never Ending Song of Love limped to number 72 and became her final chart entry. Her 1990 album Ain't Gonna Worry and 1992's 3 Good Reasons didn't chart at all. Country radio had moved on. The sophisticated crossover queen who once ruled the airwaves was now invisible. It wasn't a sudden crash. It was a slow fade, the kind that feels worse because you see it coming and can't stop it. Radio programmers stopped returning calls. Record label meetings became tense. Tour dates grew smaller. The woman who had once filled arenas was now playing county fairs and casino lounges. Not because her voice had failed. Not because the hits didn't deserve airplay, but because the industry had decided she was yesterday's news. She later described those years as difficult, the word carrying far more weight than its simplicity suggested. Country music had abandoned older artists of all kinds, she noted. It wasn't personal, it was business. But business doesn't soften the blow when you realize the same radio stations that once begged for your records now won't play them at all. And yet, even as her career dimmed, another kind of success quietly sustained her. While other country stars cycled through marriages and tabloid scandals, Crystal Gayle had something rarer than platinum records, a love that endured. On June 3, 1971, at just 20 years old, Crystal married Vasilios Bill Gatsimos, a Greek-American psychology student she'd met in high school. He wasn't from the music industry. He didn't want her fame. He wanted her. And in a genre littered with broken vows and bitter divorces, they built something almost unheard of. 53 years together. Bill graduated from Indiana University in 1974, then Vanderbilt Law School in 1979. He became her manager, the president of Gayle Enterprises, and the steady hand behind the scenes. They even co-wrote Beyond You together in 1975, a quiet collaboration that reflected their partnership offstage. When asked about the secret to their longevity, Crystal's answer was simple. Pursuing our own interests and letting each other breathe. Their children, Catherine Claire and Christos James, were what Crystal called road babies. I remember coming off stage and breastfeeding and then doing another show, she once said with a soft laugh. The juggling act of motherhood and stardom never stopped, but she refused to choose between them. She brought them everywhere, turned tour buses into nurseries, and somehow made it work. No scandals, no addiction, no public meltdowns, no tragedies involving her children. In a genre where dysfunction often seems like a prerequisite for authenticity, Crystal Gayle's stable family life felt almost subversive. But that stability came with its own kind of loneliness. While her career crumbled, while radio abandoned her, Bill and the children were there. And that, more than any award, became the true measure of success. Still, the quiet hurt of being forgotten by an industry she had helped define never fully faded. The woman who had once been country music's crossover queen now watched younger artists dominate the charts with sounds that borrowed from the path she had pioneered. And no one seemed to remember. But if career decline was a slow bleed, the tragedies that followed were sudden, merciless, and unrelenting. Because Crystal Gayle's greatest losses were not professional, they were the people she loved. It's heartbreaking how life sometimes takes not all at once, but piece by piece, year after year, until you realize you've spent decades burying the people who made you. For Crystal Gayle, the death toll began long before her career did, and it never stopped. Her father, Melvin Theodore Webb, had been the first. Taken by black lung disease when she was only 8, his death carved a silence into her that never healed. But he was only the beginning. The Webb family, once 8 strong, began to fracture under the weight of time and tragedy. Melvin Jr., the eldest, died on July 1, 1993 at 63. Then came J. Lee Webb, the brother who had followed Crystal and Loretta into music, chasing his own country music dreams. He died on July 31, 1996 at just 59, his body ravaged by pancreatic cancer. Crystal later covered his song, "You Never Were Mine," on her 2019 album, a tribute to the brother whose voice was silenced too soon. Donald Ray Webb, the songwriter who penned "Clock on the Wall" and other country gems, passed on October 13, 2017, at 76. Each loss landed differently. Each one took a piece of the family history with it, but none of them prepared Crystal for what came next. October 4, 2022. Loretta Lynn, the coal miner's daughter, the legend who had given Crystal her name, her first break, and the advice that saved her career, died at 90 years old. The world lost a legend. We lost a sister. Love you, Loretta. Crystal's statement was brief, but behind those words lived decades of shared poverty, mutual survival, and a bond forged in Butcher Hollow that fame could never break. 8 days later, at CMT's Artist of the Year ceremony, Crystal stood on stage with her sister Peggy Sue and sang "Coal Miner's Daughter." Her voice trembled but didn't break. As I look out into the audience, she told the crowd, "I see so many faces that my sister considered friends." And in her words, "Love you, honey." It was tribute. It was grief. It was a little sister trying to hold onto the memory of the woman who had once told her, "Stop singing my songs and find your own voice." In a February 2024 interview, 2 years after Loretta's death, Crystal spoke with raw honesty about what remained. "I miss my sister. I feel like she's still with me in so many ways, and I talk to her." The phone calls of picking up the phone and calling her. "I didn't get down there as much as I wanted during the last time period because of COVID, so really it was talking and carrying on. We laughed a lot. As I've always said, we wanted to rule the world. We could fix every problem." Her voice cracked slightly when she added, "Music is healing. Music is so much more than a song." It was clear she wasn't just talking about her career, she was talking about survival. 5 siblings gone. Her father gone. Her mother, Clara Marie, who had endured miscarriages in cornfields and held the family together with hands like leather, had died back in 1981. The Creek Gang, once 8 strong, was now 3. Just Crystal, Herman, and Peggy Sue remained. The rest were ghosts, memories carried in songs and photographs, voices that no longer answered when she called. And yet she kept moving, kept performing, kept singing. Because what else was there to do when grief becomes your permanent companion? You either let it bury you or you turn it into something that sounds like hope. Now at 74, Crystal Gayle stands not as a relic of country music's golden age, but as a woman still fighting for the sound of her own voice. She performs 80 to 100 shows annually, her schedule filled with dates at the Grand Ole Opry, theaters across America, and intimate venues where the fans who never forgot her still come to hear Brown Eyes Blue one more time. Concert reviews remain strong. She is sounding better than ever and looking great, one reviewer noted in 2024. Another fan observed with quiet reverence, "She still has it, and the voice is absolutely beautiful." She is humble about being a member of the Opry. The woman who once filled arenas now plays smaller rooms, but the power in her voice hasn't dimmed. If anything, it has deepened. enriched by decades of loss and survival. Her net worth is estimated between $10 and $12 million, built from royalties that still flow from Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue, from concert revenue, and from years of careful financial management. She and Bill live in Nashville's Belmead neighborhood, a quiet, tree-lined enclave far from the chaos of Music Row. Their children have given them grandchildren, and Crystal speaks of them with the same soft warmth she once reserved for talking about her own road babies. The hair remains, though now it falls somewhere between her knees and ankles, rather than sweeping the floor. "I'm lucky to have healthy hair," she said in 2024. "I always attribute it to my American Indian blood, Cherokee. All the girls in our family, they could have long hair to the ground if they wanted to, but I was the only one crazy enough to do it." The laugh that followed carried no bitterness, just the awareness that the thing she had refused to cut, the signature that label executives once demanded she sacrifice, had outlasted them all. She continues to record. In 2019, after 16 years without a new album, she released You Don't Know Me, a collection of classic country standards produced by her son, Christos. In May 2024, she recorded Sentimental Journey with the Glenn Miller Orchestra. She has spoken of unreleased material sitting in vaults, waiting for the right moment. "I've always been in the studio recording things," she explained. "I probably have a bunch of things in there, just never release them, which I'm planning on doing." When asked about retirement, she laughs. "I'll know when it's time to say, okay, I'm going to put my feet up. But I'm enjoying it too." There is no bitterness in her voice, no resentment toward an industry that once abandoned her. Just the quiet satisfaction of a woman who survived everything the world threw at her and kept singing anyway. Her legacy is complicated. She is the first female country artist to earn platinum certification, a barrier breaker who paved the way for crossover stars like Shania Twain and Taylor Swift. She accumulated 18 #1 hits, more than her legendary sister. She won Grammys, CMAs, ACMs, and American Music Awards. She has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. She is a member of the Grand Ole Opry and the Kentucky Music Hall of Fame, but she is also the woman who was told to cut her hair to stay relevant. The artist who watched her sophisticated sound become a liability when country music demanded authenticity over artistry. The shy girl from Butcher Hollow who spent a decade escaping her sister's shadow, only to watch the industry forget her name entirely. And she is the survivor. 5 siblings buried. A father lost to black lung disease when she was 8. A career that soared higher than most and fell harder than it should have. A marriage that lasted 53 years in a genre where love stories rarely survive the second album. A voice that still fills theaters because the people who loved her never stopped coming back. The people that come back to your shows year after year, Crystal said in 2024, those are friends that you made through the years. They're not fans, they're friends. It was a simple statement, but it carried the weight of a woman who had learned the difference between applause and loyalty, between fame and love, between being seen and being known. Crystal Gayle's story is not one of scandal or self-destruction. It is quieter than that, more devastating in its subtlety. It is the story of a woman who was born into poverty so grinding it should have crushed her, who lost her father before she understood what fathers were supposed to be, who spent her youth being compared to a sister she could never equal, who finally found her own voice only to watch the industry abandon it, and who buried 5 siblings while still standing on stages singing about love and heartache as if those were separate things. She turned the silence into strength, poverty into platinum, grief into grace, and somehow at 74 she is still here, still singing, still carrying the weight of a family that gave country music 2 of its greatest voices. And the price she paid for that survival is beyond heartbreaking. So if Crystal Gayle's voice ever moved you, if her story reminds you that resilience doesn't roar but hums softly through decades, leave your thoughts below. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that survival itself is a kind of victory, Because Crystal Gayle's legacy is not just the song she sang. It is the proof that even when the world forgets your name, you can still sing your truth. And that, more than any award, is what makes a legend.